I will be leaving you and moving to Palm Springs with my 25-year-old girlfriend. I will take all of our money with me. This message came in at 3 a.m. I had just finished a 14-hour shift on an offshore rig in the Persian Gulf, local time. I'm Jack Mitchell. I've been working on oil rigs around the world for 27 years, and I'm 52 years old. When I opened the message from Emma, my wife of 18 years, my hands were still covered in crude oil. I looked at the phone screen when another message appeared. A screenshot from our joint account, showing a balance of $0, instead of the expected $142,000. She included a kiss emoji, as if that could soften the truth. I didn't throw my phone or punch the wall. Instead, I sat on the bed in the cramped bedroom where I shared space with two colleagues, and typed back, "Okay, good luck." Then, I turned off the phone and went to take a shower. The next day, when I skipped breakfast and went straight to work, my colleagues started noticing the difference. James, my subordinate who frequently checks safety, didn't ask anything. We have a responsibility to maintain the safety and operation of this floating metal city, with 16 staff working tirelessly. Personal issues are always kept quiet. I checked my email during lunch break. Emma had filed for divorce and accused me of neglecting the marriage due to being abroad for work too much. Mark, a lawyer specializing in large asset divorce cases, had been hired by her. They were asking for spousal support from my massive income. She didn't even hesitate to mention that her spiritual friend was now living in our house in Los Angeles. I returned to work, closed my laptop, and didn't discuss it with anyone. However, that evening I wrote an email, but it wasn't sent to Emma. It was sent to my cousin, Peter, an accountant in New York. I wrote that it was time to activate the winter plan. It was a code we had used for many years. No further explanation was needed. 3 minutes later, his reply was sent. "Do not respond to any information until you return to the U.S." I had scheduled 2 more weeks of work on this shift, with 12-hour shifts in the 110-degree heat. Meanwhile, the life I thought was falling apart at home was still going on. My colleagues would understand if I asked for emergency leave. But what would that accomplish? It's better to finish the job and get paid. After resting in the evening, Ethan, my supervisor, came by my room. "Is everything okay?" He wasn't just asking about the drilling work. I replied, "Everything is fine." In reality, things were much better than Emma could imagine. I met Emma at a friend's fishing tackle shop in Tucson 19 years ago. She was 31 at the time and worked at the checkout counter. She loved joking about how city folks thought fishing was a complicated art. I was 33 years old, had been in the oil industry for 10 years, and was between contracts helping my friend with inventory work. 11 months later, we got married. It was quick, but at the time it made sense. I had a stable life, owned my own house thanks to an investment in a small manufacturer that had been acquired, and maintained a steady career on international oil rigs. She admired my focus and stability. I was impressed by her energy and how she could connect with everyone. The biggest challenge had always been the work schedule, with 2 months on and 1 month off between shifts. However, the pay was excellent. I could earn in 6 months what most people in our community had to work 3 years to make. We both agreed that it was worth it. She took care of the family while I built our future. The first cracks appeared when she was 12. Little things. Complaints about birthdays not being celebrated. Questions about whether I needed to take a contract from Saudi Arabia. Remarks about her friends bringing their husbands to dinner parties. Looking back, I have to admit it. She stopped asking when I would return when I turned 47. She also stopped sending pictures of her activities. I had overlooked the shorter duration of our video calls, thinking it was just a natural progression of a long-distance marriage. The excitement was replaced by comfort. The uncertainty was replaced by routine. I came home last Christmas and discovered that she had completely redecorated the house without telling me. Fresh paint, new furniture, everything had been updated. When I asked about it, she just said that I needed a change. I didn't ask about the change she was referring to. 2 months ago, I found transfers from our joint account to an account I didn't recognize. She explained that it was for house maintenance. The structure of the house needed improvement. Before I left for this trip, I stopped by home. There was no sign of repairs, but a black Audi I had never seen was parked in the driveway. She hasn't responded to my questions for the past 4 weeks. She just sent a few messages saying she was busy with a new job. I was planning to come home early. However, I convinced myself that I needed to trust my wife, who had been with me for 18 years. Harold, our neighbor, sent me a picture of a moving truck parked in front of our house 3 days ago. All he wrote was, "I thought you'd want to know." I just waited, not replying. Sometimes the best action a man can take is to do nothing at all. Sometimes the truth reveals itself. The day after I received Emma's message, I finished work and returned to my room. My satellite phone vibrated. It was Brendan. He asked if I was sitting down. He wanted to tell me. He was straightforward about it. This had been prepared for at least 14 months. The regular transfers into an account under her name before we got married. It started with a small investment of $2,000 in one place and $3,000 in another. Then the amount grew over the past 90 days. The total amount transferred was $214,000, not just the $142,000 from our joint account. In a moment, the room seemed to tilt to one side. It was far more than the savings we had in our joint account. Brendan continued, "There's one more thing. 6 months ago, she changed the beneficiary on your life insurance policy. Additionally, she took out a $40,000 credit line secured by the property of the house. I forged your signature for this." I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly feeling the rumbling sound of the rig's generators beneath me. They had been together for 18 years. She had been gradually removing me from the life we had shared for nearly 20 years, piece by piece, over the past year. Eventually, I had to ask about that man. Devin Forrester, 25 years old, as she said, a former personal trainer. No significant work history in the past 3 years. 3 previous relationships with women over 45. Each relationship ended within 18 months. I didn't need to see the common denominator clearly. Moreover, Brendan's voice grew lower as he moved through the miles. Next Tuesday, there are credit card payments for 2 one-way tickets to Palm Springs. 3 days. Before I could get home, she had tried to take it all, not just leave me. I sat in the darkness of my room for a long time after hanging up. I didn't turn on the light. I just sat there, watching how my memories were being rearranged, as if the pieces were of a different puzzle. She used to call late at night when it was cold outside. 3 years ago, she suddenly became intensely interested in fitness. Complaints about money, even though we had quite a healthy reserve. What hurt me the most wasn't the betrayal, but the preparation, the careful planning to break our life apart, all while keeping a smile on her face. I sent money home while she kept telling me she missed me. I felt a change in myself right then. The pain turned into something hard and cold. I went to the closet, took out my laptop, and logged into an email account that only Brendan and I knew about. I logged into the investment company we had established 8 years ago after witnessing a colleague lose everything due to divorce. The stream running through our land, named after my grandmother, and Winter Light Holdings had been combined. The account balance when it was set up was $1.6 million. Over the past 8 years, I had transferred 70% of my income into this account. This was legal because it had been tax declared, but it was separate from our marital assets due to the company structure that Brendan had set up. I sent a single email to my lawyer in Houston. Proceed with Operation Cold Spin. Then I closed the laptop and went to the common room to enjoy a cup of coffee. I felt hunger for the first time in days. I arrived in Houston 38 hours after finishing work. Brendan welcomed me at the airport and handed me a folder with documents and a disposable phone. When we reached his car, he told me she had been calling your phone nonstop since yesterday. The account she transferred money into had been locked by the bank. This is the standard procedure for large transfers. They require you to come in person to verify the information. She didn't know I had come back. Thomas and I were the only ones doing this. Thomas is my lawyer. However, this wasn't the most notable part. He took out his tablet and presented a series of messages between Emma and a man named D. I quickly skimmed through them. The strategies for their future life. Jokes about my job overseas while they spent my money. Details about the house in Palm Springs that they had already put a deposit on. However, one exchange that took place 2 days ago caught my attention. Emma, the account has been locked by the bank. It needs to be verified in person. They require a long journey. What should we do? He'll stay on the rig for another 10 days. Tell him his mother is in crisis. Ask him to allow you to handle this. You're still his wife. Emma. He's not answering my calls. Make an effort to push through. We need the funds before the house closing next week. Otherwise, we should consider Plan B. Emma. I'm not comfortable with Plan B, D. It's just insurance money. There's a reason behind his job in a high-risk occupation. Accidents happen all the time. Brendan took the tablet from me. My hands were cold, but steady. Are these acceptable? I asked. They're pulled directly from her phone's cloud storage. Last year, she used your Apple account credentials to set up her new phone. Don't change the password. Everything is synced to your cloud storage automatically. We moved on to Thomas's office. He'd already prepared the divorce papers, a criminal complaint for the forgery of the home equity loan, and an emergency petition to freeze all assets. Once seated, Thomas told us there was an issue. Yesterday, she filed a domestic violence claim against you, saying she left due to ongoing emotional abuse and financial control. She claimed she was deeply afraid for her safety. That's ridiculous, I said. I've been 6,000 miles away for the past 7 weeks. It's irrelevant. The intention behind this is to garner sympathy from the judge and legitimize the funds she's taking, Thomas explained. Her attorney is pushing for an emergency hearing tomorrow to secure a restraining order against you and exclusive possession of the house. She plans to bar me from entering the property, while her partner stays there. Thomas shook his head. There's more, he added. She's already used the home equity loan. 3 days after receiving it, the funds were transferred to an LLC under Devin Forrester's name. I let out a deep sigh. What's the next move? We file a counterclaim immediately. Fraud, forgery, alienation of affection, and conspiracy, all of it based on the text messages we have. We're requesting an emergency block on all her accounts and the LLC, he said, sliding a document across the desk. This is saved in our records. I looked down at the paper. Motion to dismiss the domestic violence claim based on perjury evidence. What's the evidence? I asked. Thomas gave a faint smile. You've been on the oil platform for 7 consecutive weeks, confirmed by the location data from your company's security credentials. The entry and exit stamps on your passport corroborate it. I also subpoenaed your phone records, which show a complete log of your communications with Emma over the past year. No arguments, no threats, Thomas continued. I've prepared everything. I signed the document in the designated spot. One more thing, Thomas said. It's important that you act surprised when she's served. She doesn't know you're back yet. Right now, you're still considered to be at sea. I nodded. I can do that. As I left Thomas's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma to my usual number. Please contact me. It's urgent. I need your help. I didn't respond. She didn't set the trap. I stayed at Brendan's place that evening and got a better night's sleep than I had in weeks. The next morning, I accessed the security camera feed for our house in Austin, a system I'd installed 3 years ago and had been maintaining remotely. Either Emma had forgotten about it, or she thought I couldn't access it from abroad. The footage showed a young man lounging by our pool, sipping whiskey from my collection, and wearing a sweatshirt that looked like my old college hoodie. He was talking to someone on my phone, laughing while his feet were up on the outdoor furniture I had built myself. Emma entered the frame as I watched. She seemed uneasy, pacing as she spoke. I couldn't hear the audio, but her body language was clear. Things were not going as planned. Brendan walked in with a cup of coffee. He opened his laptop and said, "You need to see this." He had spent the previous evening digging deeper into Devin Forrester's background. The discovery he made changed everything. He's done this before. 3 times. Brendan turned the screen towards me. The same pattern each time, he continued. He finds a woman, usually married, financially stable. The relationship progresses. She leaves her husband, takes whatever money she can, and they move together. And then he disappears, I said, already knowing the pattern. Brendan nodded. He disappears with whatever's left in 18 months. The screen was filled with news articles, court documents, and social media posts. 3 women over the past 5 years. Devon had accumulated credit card debt in their names, and one of the women he left was still paying it off. Brendan leaned in closer and whispered, "There's more." For a moment, I was distracted by the weight of it. He was a person of interest in the death of his second fiancée's ex-husband. 6 weeks after the divorce filing, there was a suspicious car accident. A man fell off a cliff on a road he'd driven for 20 years. No charges, but the implications linger. Emma's phone rang again, this time on my usual line. I let it go to voicemail. Brendan played the message through the speaker, insisting I needed to hear it. "Miles, sir, I need you to contact the creditor. We had a miscommunication regarding our account. I was just moving the funds to a safer investment like we discussed when the bank froze everything. I can't access any of the money." I could hear her voice cracking, as though she was fighting tears. "Please, contact them and let them know everything is fine. I'm really scared, Miles. I wasn't buying it." "We never discussed this," I said, staring at the phone. The performance was convincing. 2 weeks ago, I would have believed her. During our lunch meeting, Thomas had informed us that Emma was in a state of panic. The Palm Springs property is closing in 5 days. They need that money. Brendan said, looking at me, "What's our next move?" "The emergency hearing is scheduled for this afternoon. Judge Winters will preside over the proceedings. She does not tolerate false allegations of domestic violence. Your alibi has been documented. As for the bank funds, we have submitted a request for them to be returned exclusively to you. However, there's something else you need to know." Thomas pushed a folder across the table. "Harold, your neighbor, brought these to my office this morning. Inside were photographs of furniture being loaded into a moving truck." "This is my furniture," I said. "Artifacts passed down through generations. Items that had belonged to my family for years." Thomas confirmed. "They're clearing out the house, planning to disappear, regardless of whether the bank's funds arrive." I closed the folder and handed it back to him. "Changes to the plan." Both men's gazes were fixed on me. "I'm eager to return home," I started. "That's not advised," Thomas countered. "I'm not planning to confront them," I clarified. "Just to observe. I've been away long enough. I'm curious to see it firsthand." Brendan and Thomas exchanged glances. "Also, I want to be there when they're served. I wasn't hiding behind legalities anymore. When Emma's world falls apart, I want her to see my face." Thomas hesitated before nodding. "I'll make the arrangements." As we left the restaurant, my disposable phone buzzed. It was Harold. "They're packing your grandfather's desk, the one you restored so carefully," Harold texted. "I thought you'd want to know. Some types of theft go beyond just financial loss. Some betrayals cut deeper. This hit harder now, with personal significance weighing heavily." I had 6 hours to think as we drove to Odessa. Thomas had arranged for the constable to serve the papers at 9 a.m. The next day, Brendan set up surveillance from Harold's house across the street, where I planned to stay overnight. Everything was in place. Harold silently greeted me when I arrived just after midnight. He was a retired petroleum engineer, having spent 30 years working on rigs. "No need to explain," he said, nodding as we entered the building. "Is she unaware you're watching her?" "No," he replied. "They've been busy packing all day, taking valuable items and leaving the rest behind." He pointed out his window, which gave him a clear view of my driveway. 2 moving trucks had come and gone, and larger trucks would finish the job the following morning. I processed the information, then asked, "Has anyone else been by?" A woman with a clipboard was seen yesterday, Harold said. Looked like a real estate agent. That wasn't expected. I raised an eyebrow. Is the house being sold? Looks like it. I saw her taking photographs. I contacted Thomas, who assured me he would verify the property records the following morning. I sat at Harold's kitchen table at 3 a.m., unable to sleep, reviewing the documents that Brendan had prepared. The bank records were clear, showing Krista's systematic depletion of our accounts. Phone records detailed the hours of calls made to Devin over the past year. On the days she claimed she was visiting her sister, hotel expenses appeared on her credit card statements in our town. The evidence was presented with cold, objective clarity. This was not a fleeting betrayal. It was a calculated extraction. A planned dismantling of everything we had built piece by piece. Thomas confirmed via text by sunrise. 2 days earlier, Krista had listed our home with a real estate agency. The asking price was 30% below market value, clearly aimed at making a quick sale. She had forged my signature on the listing agreement. I watched Krista and Devin load the last items into Devin's black Audi at 8:30 a.m. From Harold's kitchen window. The items were small, valuable, and easily moved. The antique clock my father had given me before his passing. My grandmother's silver picture frames. At 8:45 a.m., a large moving truck arrived. 3 people got out and headed toward the house, following the scheduled plan. At 8:55 a.m., the moving truck was blocked by an unmarked vehicle parked directly behind it. A woman in a business suit and 2 sheriff's deputies got out. Thomas had sent a court officer to accompany them. "Harold, it's time," I told him. As the deputies approached my front door, I crossed the street. Krista's response shifted from irritation to confusion as the officers identified themselves. "Please be advised, Mrs. Mitchell, we have documents for you and the gentleman on the premises." I stood just out of sight, watching as the color drained from her face. Devin, appearing behind her, slipped his arms around her waist as she called for him. That's when I made my appearance. I will never forget the look on Krista's face as the shock faded into dread, then into calculation. Devin looked completely confused. She whispered to Jack, "You're supposed to be on the platform." I murmured, "Surprise," and nodded at the deputies to proceed. The stack of documents: emergency restraining order, suspension of all assets, criminal complaint for forgery, nullification of the house listing, and notice of divorce proceedings citing fraud and criminal conspiracy was all handed over. Devin exhaled sharply. "You can't pull this off. She's terrified of you. We have a domestic violence claim." This morning, Judge Winters dismissed me. I interrupted. Abusing someone from 6,000 miles away is a tricky business. The judge was particularly interested in the text messages that detailed your backup plan involving my insurance policy. Devin's face drained of color. Emma stepped forward, tears welling up in her eyes. "Jack, this is all a misunderstanding. I had just finished saving our documents for her," motioning toward the moving truck. "Are we planning our future by selling the house without telling me? Or are we protecting our assets by abandoning our home?" She couldn't answer. The court officer instructed that you have 30 minutes to remove your personal belongings. All other items were subject to court inventory, except for clothing and hygiene items. I turned to leave as they entered the house under supervision. "Where are you going?" I received a call from Emma. I did not look back. Home. 3 weeks later, the hearing took place. I sat at one of the tables while Emma, her attorney, and Thomas sat at another. Devin was noticeably absent. He had disappeared 2 days after being served, taking Emma's remaining cash and jewelry with him. A familiar pattern, as Brendan had already deduced. The evidence was thoroughly examined by the judge. Text messages, bank statements, fraudulent documents, and location data. The judge paused and looked directly at Emma when she reached the messages about Plan B and the insurance money. "Mrs. Mitchell, are you aware of the consequences of conspiring to commit insurance fraud or worse?" Emma's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. Emma stammered, "It wasn't like that, Your Honor." Devin was just joking. I would never have gone that far. The judge interrupted. That should be dealt with in criminal court. This court handles the division of assets and the dissolution of marriage. She continued reviewing the documents, occasionally rubbing her forehead. After a while, she placed the papers down and took off her glasses. In my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely encountered a case of premeditated financial deception within a marriage as clear as this one. The judge turned her gaze to Emma. While forging documents and preparing to leave the state with marital assets, you systematically drained joint accounts. Emma's expression softened slightly as she turned toward the judge. While the court may find the establishment of separate accounts through a holding company questionable to some, you have consistently paid household expenses, filed accurate taxes, and made no attempt to hide assets from the government. Your only goal was to protect them from potential future claims. The judge's decision was swift and firm. Emma will return all the assets she transferred to Jack. The house is solely Jack's property. Emma's requests for spousal support are denied. Finally, the judge forwarded the evidence of forgery and conspiracy to the district attorney's office for consideration of potential criminal charges, which was the most satisfying outcome. Emma tried to approach me as we exited the courtroom. I kept walking. Certain victories need no further explanation. 6 months later, I stood on the veranda of my cabin in the mountains outside of Missoula, Montana. Winterlight Holdings had owned the property from the start. I had purchased 40 acres of pine forest and meadow 5 years ago as part of my retirement plan. Emma never knew it existed. The forgery charges against her had been reduced as part of a plea agreement. Her sentence did not include prison time. However, she was sentenced to 5 years of probation and restitution payments, which she was unlikely to fulfill. She had found work in the retail industry and was living with her sister in Tulsa, according to the most recent information I had received. Devin, following his usual pattern, had moved on to a divorce doctor in Arizona. I had retired early from the energy company. 27 years was enough. With my savings, investments, and modest natural gas royalties from a property in Arkansas, I had more than enough to sustain myself for the rest of my life. Harold would occasionally reach out to update me on things in Austin. I had sold the house there, too many memories, none of them good anymore. He had helped with the final clearing of my belongings, transporting the family heirlooms to Montana and donating the rest. Brendan's envelope, containing the final documentation for the dissolution of Winterlight Holdings, arrived in the afternoon mail. It had served its purpose. A chapter was closed, taxes were paid, and the assets were transferred. I sat on the porch swing I had built that summer as the sun set behind the mountains and poured myself a glass of bourbon. For the first time in years, no one was expecting anything from me. The silence, broken only by the sound of the wind in the pines, was peaceful. No crew waiting for instructions, no wife pretending to miss me. My phone rang. A new project manager from a Canadian energy company was offering me a consulting position. Good pay, minimal travel, and the opportunity to share the knowledge I'd gained over the years. I told him I would think it over, and I would, but not tonight. Tonight was just for me, for the peace I had finally found, for the life I was now living on my own terms.